right, we're live now. Eric Melch here with Dealer Teamwork, and I am joined today from longtime friend and actually one of my first friends in the industry, Glen Garvin. So great to see you this morning.
You as well, Eric. Thanks for having me on here in your inaugural presentation here, or for at least
Yeah,
for somebody
this is
outside
great. Yeah, it's great to see it. We in keeping with the changing times, we thought we would start doing obviously a little bit different approach. As with everything else going on right now, obviously there's just there's so much dynamic change going on. So we figured, let's take advantage of the relationships that we have. Let's take advantage of the stories that we can tell. And let's try to connect on a different level. So when we started talking about it, obviously, all the standard usual suspects popped into my mind, and I thought how fitting it would be to have you. So again, welcome. So tell me a little bit about what is changed so far, just for you, both on a personal level and then we'll get into the work stuff. So how are things different for you, personally?
I work from home already. Our company's based in Rochester, New York. Your hometown, but I work from home, so that doesn't change a ton for me. But everybody in the office is now working remotely. So they're the folks we had there. So some logistical challenges, obviously, from a work perspective. I've got one high schooler who's still at home, so he's here all the time now. Instead of being gone for the day. So it's weird. I've been staying up later and sleeping in a little bit later for some odd reason. I don't do that in the summer times, but for some reason now I've been doing that. Trying to force myself into some exercise, but that's fallen by the wayside a little bit. So, seen a lot of jokes about the COVID-19 being the 19 pounds you gain like the freshman 15. So I'm trying to keep that off. But, personally, it's changed. It's obviously worrisome in the business, but, trying to manage cash and trying to get through this period of time.
So in terms of things changing, and there's a lot of crazy news that's out there right now. One thing that has caught my eye recently, especially, is this stuff going on with, obviously all the new stuff and changes with the government and whatnot. Specifically speaking about the, I don't know if you caught it over the weekend, this stuff going on with the post office bailout. So I heard through the grapevine that you personally think the post office is one of the best run government agencies. Is that true?
Yes, I've changed my mind a little bit on that, Erica. It's funny that you bring that up. I did at one point have, I actually ran some tests because I thought that there were some large inefficiencies with the U.S. Postal Service and mailing some things, and then finding out, actually, when I got my findings, I did in fact find out there were some inefficiencies, or at least I presumed to be some inefficiencies, and contacted a postmaster general, which exists, and they educated me on some things, and I have to leave it at that. I'm sworn by secrecy on some of the things I've learned, but I have a newfound respect for the Postal Service, and with the hope of having my mail that I still need delivered to me in a timely fashion. That's all I'm going to say about that.
That's interesting. Interesting. Well, we will leave it at that. Another interesting question for you too. In terms of just organizations and just a little bit different thoughts, share with us your thoughts on libraries and your position on the weight of the books. What is that all about?
Well, I think, it seems like Brent Weiss has set me up for some of these, or maybe perhaps or someone else in the organization, because he has a fondness of this. His main thing is
it wasn't Brent.
Well, I'm sure it was Mark, but the libraries, yes, I've got a long-standing thing on libraries, and perhaps one of the lesser known threads of that conversation on why libraries shouldn't exist is that the weight of the books, in theory, would actually be, if you took all the weight of that, would pull us just slightly closer to the core of the earth, which could be contributing to global warming effects that we've seen, because that weight, as we get closer to the core, the surface becomes a little bit warmer, and therefore contributing to global warming.
Oh, Glenn, I love the way your mind works.
Yeah, yeah. I get a lot of this from Jay Radke, you know. I'm kidding.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah,
When I heard that story, I was like, this is awesome. So I
yeah.
that's good. So let me tell a quick story as well. I want everybody to,
Yep,
I think this is, this is the purpose of doing these new shows and these new sessions. Um, how we met. So I was a new dealer and very, very ignorant, didn't know what was going on, didn't know which way was up in the industry at the time. And I get an email from you, I believe it was an email, asking if I'd like to be on a panel, so at NADA. So again, I'm so new, I'm so young in the industry, who's this guy? What's a panel? What's NADA? I had no idea. I said, yeah, sounds
right,
fun. So we go, I meet you. That's where I meet Paul Potraz. I meet Tom White Jr. And we do this panel, and the room is packed. There's a ton of people. We had just a huge, huge standing room only audience, and and that kind of it was kind of my introduction to the industry, all thanks to you. So I like to joke, with some of our other friends that you created the monster within me, within the whole conference going and the social stuff and all of that great stuff. So I have you to thank for that, and I've always appreciated that. So I always thought that was interesting. For those that don't know, share a little bit about your backstory in the industry. How did you get started? Where did it all start for you? You've got such a successful career and you've done so much. Share with that.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Yeah, so that's I think it was probably a Twitter direct message, or might have even been a public one rather than an email. But that's how I originally met you, was just by the people in automotive I was following on Twitter. But yeah, I got out of my grandfather was a car dealer in Rochester, New York. Ironically, he had a Chrysler DeSoto store in Henrietta.
Right.
So had that a long time ago. But he became a farmer, and I knew him only as a farmer. But I graduated from college and was looking for my Wall Street job or something that I imagined I'd just get in line for and would just fall in my lap, which, so I was bartending, waiting for that to happen. Guy walked into a bar and started talking to me about an opportunity. And next thing I knew, I was out, hanging labels, window stickers on cars around New Jersey and Philadelphia, just, helping like Monroney labels to list the options and equipment. And kind of there was on the front, cutting edge of a lot of the industry as it moved online. Started with photography, even doing some websites at that point. And so that was a franchise of a business that we sold to Trader Publishing, which became Dominion, and worked my way up in that organization, being a VP of their inventory products for a number of years. And so met a lot of people through the industry and industry events over that time period. And then eventually wound up here at True Images, where I've been the last 3.5 years or so, running that organization.
Yeah, speaking of True Images, which was started by a good friend of ours, obviously Mark Agor. Again, I've known Mark for a long time. I think the story goes that he likes to share is I think he dated my sister way back in the day, but he is a great guy. So tell us a little bit about that. I remember when I first heard about the idea, I was fascinated by it. I've always been a big fan of True Images. So tell us a little bit about what True Images is and what it does, and essentially the problem it solves.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. When I was at Dominion, these guys, Mark and a couple other partners, came in and talked about their business to us, and I would hear pitches from a lot of different companies at the time, and a lot of them, I wasn't crazy about it. This one I heard, I was like, this could be an impact to True Images business, but I really liked it. I wanted to buy the company at that point. So what True Images does is creates a library of new car images for the same exact make and model. So you don't have to keep retaking the same photos time and time again throughout the model year. Saves a lot of time and most importantly, just efficiency, getting your photo percentages up. And I think if one of the things that's come out of the whole coronavirus situation we're in is, the importance of digital retailing, digital merchandising. If you weren't aware of it before now, it's certainly forefront now that you've got to get that stuff done. So I think, in the long run, that's going to be more of an eye opener to the dealers to make sure they're getting their photos and videos and descriptions and all that stuff done right online. So, and so it becomes a repository so that they don't have to, a lot of that becomes automated, so they don't have to keep reshooting the same cars over and over again in a model year.
So it goes without saying, huge efficiency and productivity tool. But what about the cost? I have to imagine there's a cost savings if you're duplicating images or at least manipulating like that.
Yeah, probably about half the dealers in the country do their photos in-house. Half of them do with a third-party company. And both are valid decisions based on the dealership's logistics. But in either case, you're going to save either the time and staffing that you have in your internal, or with a third-party company not having to shoot as many photographs. So the cost savings is pretty substantial, especially the larger dealer that you are, the more benefit you'll get out of it, depending on the OEM that you represent. But your cost savings and efficiencies are going to be pretty dramatic.
So how is everything impacting you guys right now? What do you see? What do you see different with the way True Images is operating right now, versus the way you were, and where do you think things are headed for you guys?
Yeah, we've been on a pretty good growth curve up until really this stuff hit here in kind of mid-March. So our first quarter was still better than where we were last year in new dealer growth. So things are progressing at a pretty good rate up until we hit this bump in the road. And I think for a lot of dealers, they've kind of stopped everything and really hunkered down, which I think in some levels is valid to evaluate what you're doing. And it's interesting. I've heard from a couple dealer groups who said, we wanted to look at this for a long time, didn't have the time to do it before now, but now we've got time on our hands, so let's look at that. And that kind of opened my eyes to some dealers who have been, I think more aggressive during this time to say, where are the things that we put off before that we now have time to look at,
Sure,
that we can get better at. There's a dealer group I know who's looked at it and said, this is the time where we can regain some market share in our area, because we can do things better. We're more aligned to do digital retailing, and we can pick up market share during this time. So
interesting. Well, I wish the best for you guys. Obviously, as like I said, always been a big supporter of you guys. How about this? I'm curious to hear your take on just how this is impacting the vendor space, with regards to conferences. We had such a run on conference. It was like peak conference, and it's been going on for years. Mass conferences, regional conferences, the booth, activity. It's almost like this is the breath of fresh air that a lot of us have been waiting for and kind of hoping for as well. But what's your take on how this is going to impact that? Obviously, just vendors in general, in terms of their ability to support the needs for dealers. So many employees have been furloughed. This is really going to impact the state of not only dealers. We understand that, but just for the vendor side of it. What do you see happening? And is there anything that you're glad to see that welcome changes as well?
That's an interesting question. The conferences serve. We do at True Images. We do both digital dealers, and we do NADA are the ones we participate in. I've always been a big fan of driving sales and what Jared's done there. From a vendor perspective, it hasn't made sense for us for a little while to do that. We did do that one in the past, but I think now we get a very strong return on investment from NADA. And I think that's still going to be, by next year, hopefully, if we don't get a second or third wave of this thing, NADA, I think will still be a pretty thriving event. Digital dealer in the fall is going to be a tough one. I don't know if what that's going to look like from a dealer turnout and where they'll be. They got some tough work ahead of them. We don't get as much return on that event as we do with NADA, but for me, a lot of the value comes from getting to see other people in the industry, brainstorm, talk through things with them, and learn. So those are opportunities to learn and grow from that I do have value in. So I think a lot of ideas I've gotten in the past, different things are coming from those brainstorming, just casual brainstorming sessions about, hey, have you thought about this? Hey, I want to pick your brain about this thing. And, those things really become valuable to me and to the industry as a whole. So I think sometimes the connectors, I've always said, a guy we both know, Steve Stauning, has been one of the most brilliant guys at taking point A and point B and creating a value out of those things. Being able to take two things together that seem unrelated and then, hey, what if these things get put together? What a great event, what a great thing this could be. And sometimes I don't see those as clearly as somebody like Steve, but seeing those values are good. Not all things Steve comes up with. Sometimes there's crazy things. But,
he's always got a great perspective. That's true.
Yeah.
Anything before we wrap up? Anything else in terms of this change in direction that you're either glad to see or sad to see? And on top of that, before you answer that, when you do go out, are you wearing a mask, or are you a mask wearer, or are you not a mask wearer?
I have yet to be a mask wearer. I had not purchased any. My girlfriend, who's a little bit more of a safety type of person, just sent me and my son some N95 masks. So I do have one now, and I think maybe the next time I'll wear it. It seems like that's been a bigger deal. I'm in Ohio. It hasn't been as big here as it is in other places.
And how long have you been locked down? What's the state?
We went pretty early. They closed schools here on March 12th, which was a little bit earlier than most, or I guess that was when they did the announcement. So our local school district is one of the biggest in Ohio. They closed on the 13th, that Friday, and then it was closed for everybody right after that. But there was only like 3 cases in the state or 6 cases in the state when they did that. Yeah. So it was pretty early on, and it's kept the numbers down here pretty significantly. Yeah, and maybe that'll mean hopefully a return to some business normalcy.
That was about the same time it hit us as well, and we've been on stay-at-home, I think, about 5 weeks now as well here in New York. But same as like you said, I've always worked from home as well, so it really hasn't changed my routine that much, other than just going out to dinner or going to friends' houses and things like that. But masks are big here. It's a little bit different perspective in New York. I think just because of proximity to the city, but I did find some N95 masks as well. And I have a couple. My wife obviously wears them all the time, but I think I've only left the house in 5 weeks, maybe 5 times. I go out like one, and it's either 2 things. It's Wegmans or the liquor store. And that's about it.
Liquor stores, I think, are going to see, or have seen that they're one of the recipients of some extra revenues out of this thing, I think.
Well, it's interesting too. Every morning I block out time to review Google Trends, and I just play around in Google Trends. That's how I start my day. And it's a good way for me to wake up and just play around with that, and I like to geek out with some of the numbers and stuff. And I just put in random search things, look at the trends and look at all that other stuff. And then I start making some crazy correlations. It's definitely not causation, but just to see the crossing. And I'm doing a presentation actually this week with James Klaus. And one of the slides is comparing 2 terms. And the first term is car dealers near me. And the second term is liquor stores near me. And car dealers, it's kind of flat and then it goes down, while at the same time liquor stores near me, and it just starts going off the charts. So it's interesting to see the difference in behavior. So with that, but going back to the last question, then we'll wrap up. In terms of things you're either anticipating to see, happy to see, sad to see, I don't know, just and it could be anything. I mean, I'd love to hear your take on that with regards specifically, Glenn. What are your takes on these dealerships in those states or rather even just the thought of the states themselves that are not forcing the lockdown? Like you saw what happened, for instance, in Kentucky yesterday. Very, very interesting, heated debate, in terms of not locking down, people flocking to church. What's your take on that?
Right. Well, to answer the first part, I think it's amazing to me, all these states that had all these regulations about online car sales, and they couldn't do it, can't do it, no, it's impossible, can't do it. All of a sudden now they found miracle ways to get this done.
Right.
The question is, why couldn't it have been done a year ago for most of these states? And now all of a sudden they found a way to do this miraculously. Some of these regulations and things were self-impediments to doing it. I love the showroom traffic. I don't spend as much time in dealerships today as I have in the past at different times in my career. But I love that there's nothing like the feeling of being inside a car dealership that's busy and it's just, everybody's running around and it's got that, there's an excitement and some type of culture to it that's fun. And we may see, that really some decline in that. I mean, we may see that in a lot of retail industries. But we may see a decline. That maybe not in overall car sales. I'm not predicting that, but that we'll see even less showroom traffic than we may have seen in the past. And I guess at some level, that makes me sad because I like the environment. I like what we have. I like the brick and mortar of what happens at a dealership, and they're beautiful retail establishments, and I like being in them. It's fun to be there. So we'll see. We'll see where that takes us. And then the states on lockdown, I don't know, what more hope, I spent too much time looking at the data, again, too much time reading Jay Radke's posts and, different things. But, seeing different schools of thought on it, I'm hopeful. There's a lot we don't know. And I think the one thing we know that we don't know is that we don't know all the details on this. And hopefully that gets us back to, people going out with, some semblance of getting back to real business here in short time with some precautions, and hopefully not getting, overwhelming to our resources and our hospitals and people who work in those industries, of course.
Well, I two quick thoughts for you. I think that from a social distancing standpoint, I think we're going to see that now start to change some people's behaviors. And this is a little bit more of a hopeful than anything, but I think in terms of changing behaviors going forward, even well after this is long gone, in terms of digital social distancing, I think people will almost to the point of there's only so much that can be done now with what we do and what we share online, and eventually it's just going to hit a point where it'll hit like hitting a wall. It's like, all right, there's only so much we can post in terms of memes, in terms of this, everybody's watching the same funny videos right now. Everybody's seeing the same news content. So it's almost like it's literally pointless. Like the share button, it's pointless to share anything because we're all cooped up. We're all looking at the same. So almost to the point of, again, being a little bit, how think of it like this, how do we become a little bit more memorable? And how do we, from even a marketing standpoint, but how do people stand out? And, to my original comment, digital social distancing will essentially become a thing, in my opinion, where maybe we start seeing people pull back from social media, or, or rather just trying to share something a little bit different in terms of, what's out there. Because eventually, like I said, we're just going to get to the point where you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Like, what am I doing? I have seen everything there is to see.
Reach the end of the internet, or as you said, reach the end of Netflix, right?
Yeah, I think I am at the end of Netflix. And it's, I said this to Susan the other night, it's almost like I become like a content snob, if you will, if that's a thing. I probably spend more time just watching the previews on Netflix than I do the actual content. And it's like, no, it's like, things like that. All right, great, man. Well, I will let you go. It's a good note to end on. Always good to see you, buddy. Stay safe. Stay safe, stay healthy. Say hi to Mark and everybody else at True Images, and all the best to you guys as well. And if you need anything, let me know. All right.
Eric, thanks for having me, and same to you and yours, to stay healthy and safe and all that.